Deb Vawdrey knew she'd given her all in her marriage. Her realisation that she needed to move on after almost 30 years was not a snap decision. Although she was filled with fear, she was absolutely clear. It was time to step into a new chapter, and when she was released from the paradigm she'd known for so long, she absolutely blossomed. In this conversation, Deb shares her experiences, the role that spiritual connection and community played in her growth, her ability to listen in to her inner voice, and how these all combined to make her the multidimensional yogi and businesswoman that she is today. I hope you find this episode as encouraging and energizing as I did. My name is Angela Raspis. I'm a business mentor, author, and self-worth educator. And you're listening to Your Next Chapter, a podcast about change and challenges, goals, and dreams, and the mix of strategy and self-worth it takes to step into the next version of you. Now, my lovely guest today describes herself as a business owner, a mum, a health coach, a yoga teacher, a professional bookkeeper, and, one of my favourite bits, a joy seeker. Deb, I'm utterly delighted to bring you on the show today so we can have a talk about the journey of change that you've been through in the last few years. So thank you for jumping on.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
You're really welcome. And we were just exchanging notes before I hit record. As I'm recording this, we're in lockdown in Sydney, and Deb, being over in Melbourne, knows what that's like because that part of our country was in a lot of lockdown last year. But nothing stops us from having these wholehearted conversations that we hope just give you a great example of possibility for something that you might want to step into. So, Deb, when I put out the request for interviewees, one of the subjects which I thought really deserves a good conversation when it comes around the topic of change is leaving a marriage. That's one of the biggest things that we can do, I guess, as women stepping into a new chapter, because it opens up a whole lot of doors. But it's not always easy to get to that point of deciding this isn't right for me any longer. So do you want to just give us some insight as to how this dawned on you, how you got to the point where you recognized that it was time for that big change, so we can dive down a wee bit?
Sure. I think probably wasn't an immediate ha-ha moment at any point. I think it was a bit of a slow burn, as it probably is for a lot of people in long-term relationships. When you get to the point when you realise that relationship has probably gone past its use-by date. I was very fortunate that there was no of the worst-case scenario type incidents that cause marriage breakups, being infidelity or abuse or anything like that. It was just simply that the marriage had pretty much outlasted its time. I had two beautiful children at the time, who obviously still have, but they were 18 and 21 at the time. Probably part of that was getting my kids through school, which I think is also probably a common thing for women. We put everyone else first, and it was very important to me to make sure that when I did do it, that it was going to be as less disruptive to my children as possible, although there's always going to be some level of disruption to their lives as well. So I think just it was as my son finished year 12, and I got to the point where I think I just realised how exhausted I was.
Mm. So when you say exhausted, and I can completely understand this, that it builds up over time, that there's very rarely today's fine and tomorrow, no, I'm out of here. But so that feeling of exhaustion, talk to us about that, because the feeling that I have is that it's on a few different levels rather than just physical exhaustion.
Oh, absolutely. It was mostly emotional exhaustion, I think. The years that had gone on that I felt that I was the only one making an effort in the relationship, there was definitely a level of physical exhaustion, because there was a big part of that period that I was supporting my ex's business as well as running my own, and obviously being a mum and a housewife as well, but all those other things that go along with that. But definitely the emotional exhaustion was what really got me to the point where I knew that there had to be that significant change of removing myself from the situation.
So if you're thinking back to the sort of questions that you were asking yourself or the discussions that you were having in your head, I mean, so often we judge our insides by other people's outsides. And as you've mentioned to me, that everything on the outside would have looked fine to the rest of the world, but there was this whole different thing going on the inside. And I think that happens in so many cases of change, whether it be the marriage, the business, lots of different things. So what was actually going on internally for you?
Yeah, totally agree. That perception can be very different to the reality. I think what was mostly internally going on for me, that it just felt like an uphill battle to have any real connection. I'd been with my ex-husband came on to 30 years at the year I left, and that was 24 years of marriage and 6 years of being with him. So it was my whole adult life. Yeah,
it's a biggie.
It is. And I think it was just, I felt that it was the duck underwater, that scenario, on top, just cruising along and running the family and so forth, but really just struggling underneath, trying to have any real connection or real true relationship there. There was just nothing left in the relationship. There was no physical relationship anymore, and there was no support. It was basically I felt, whether this was reality or not, I felt I was doing it all on my own. And my partner, we were just living parallel lives. My partner was just going about his business and not being part of the family.
It's still, even when you can list those sort of things and recognize that there's a lot of dissatisfaction and unhappiness, it's still a damn big thing to do. As you're saying, your entire adult life, this has been the primary relationship that you've been in. This has been the partnership you're used to. What role did doubt or fear play when you were considering what your options were?
Probably the leading role. There was a lot of that there. I think, when I look back at it, and since we'd had the discussion about this conversation happening, I've probably reflected quite a bit on it. And I think one big aspect that helped me get through to making the decision was partly my involvement in yoga. As you mentioned at the start, I'm a yoga teacher now, and that initiation into yoga and the people I connected with during yoga started to give me that insight into my true worth and what really did I want for myself versus what I was just doing for everybody else. So I think that was a really big part of it. And the fear and doubt was always there, even at the point of the time that I was expressing myself to my ex-husband that I was leaving. I can still remember I cried for 2 days before I told him, and stayed awake and didn't go into the marital bedroom for those 2 nights, stayed awake, like virtually was awake for 48 hours trying to sort of sort through how I was going to deal with it. And there was not even any approach towards me in those 2 days to see what was wrong or what was going on. So that just validated this needs to happen. So, the fear never went away. It's one of those situations where feel the fear and do it anyway.
Oh, that classic book. I remember reading that one. There's a couple of things that you said there, apart from the fact that there was the validation for the decision by the lack of action, I guess is the best description. But 2 things that you said is that being involved in the yoga community helped you see your worth, started to connect more to your worth and ask you that question, what did you want for yourself? And then from there, you also said, I'm a yoga teacher now. So what were you starting to imagine might have been possible? Did you have that? Did you dare to dream at that stage about what an alternative might look like? Or was it just open and I don't really have the answers? I'm curious about that.
Probably more on the side of the little bit of just opening myself up to opportunity. I didn't at that point, I think I hadn't actually started my teacher training. Actually it did cross over. There was probably a little bit of a crossover when I started my teacher training and the point in time where I left the marriage, but really didn't have that full visualization of where that was going to take me, but also did have the true understanding that where I wasn't where I wanted to be. And I think that's where the connections and even just generally the people that are regular yoga attendees generally are very open people in far as emotions go, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of them are a little more in touch with their emotions than mainstream people you come across. And I think that's something that just comes with yoga. I've as a teacher, found that having someone in class that will just end up in tears and they don't even know why, but it's something to do with that mind-body connection.
Yeah.
Brings that up. So I think, there was a little bit of a crossover, but certainly not that clear vision of how things were going to play out. There was still a very big step of unknown, but I think just that inner knowing that there was something else there. I had to open myself up to what else the universe had for me, because what was happening at that time wasn't working.
I want to just salute for a moment for yourself and for any other woman who has made this sort of major change, because it's huge, it's significant. There is so much, I guess, conditioning that keeps us in I'm not saying that all marriages are not satisfying. It's not what I'm suggesting at all, but there's a lot of conditioning that says this is what we're here for. It's to be partnered for life. It's to raise children. It's to, as you said, keep putting ourselves second, not daring to put ourselves first. And I think it's shifting and changing, but there's still a lot of layers of conditioning that need to be pulled off for us to actually say, damn it, I'm going this way, wherever that may be. I think there's also parallels between what you're speaking in terms of moving on from a relationship and not knowing what is coming as to when we make changes in our business. If we're like called in a certain direction, or to create a business that is for a particular purpose because there's something that we see in the world that we want to make a contribution to, but not knowing how it's going to turn out. So faith and trust plays a pretty big part in this, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. And I've been through both those changes and journeys in the time since leaving my ex, which was 2012. And I don't see that it's any coincidence that those two things are aligned in the timeline, because I think if I had stayed in the marriage, there's no way known I would have given myself the permission to pursue the things that I've pursued since, and probably not have had the opportunity either. So there's definitely a big synergy in freeing myself up of what was holding me back, and that being that I suppose, for want of a better word, stale relationship. What was else out there for me? Because until you get rid of those blinkers, you can't see what's out there.
Yeah, I remember hearing an expression once, and this sounds a little odd, but it's not meant to be disrespectful to anyone, but we can be unconscious incompetence, meaning we don't know what we don't know. So like there's all these other possibilities that we've never even had the opportunity for them to come into, away from the peripheral vision and in front and center, because we've been looking down this path which has these parameters around it for us. So suddenly all bets are off and the whole world is open to you. So talk to us about what happened. So you've made the decision, you had the conversation, this is not working, I'm out there. And so talk to us about what happened after that.
Or I'll probably fill in a couple of little gaps in that, just that initial having the conversation. I had a spiritual reading, which I had put off from the month before. And the reason I put it off was because the day I was supposed to have it, I had to have my dog put down, which was one of the hardest things. We all know that if any of us have had to do it, it's one of the hardest things to have to do. And was also probably another little highlight moment that my partner didn't come with me to do that. So that was another thing.
Another red flag, yeah.
Yeah, another flag, just no support, just, another thing I had to deal with on my own. And so I went and had this reading, and the day I had the reading was actually my ex-husband's birthday, which wasn't ideal, but that was the only time I could see this gentleman who I was very much wanting to see, because the readings I'd had from him before were extremely helpful. But I think in my mind, I knew once I'd had that reading, it was going to validate everything that I knew needed to happen, which is exactly what it did. I came out of the reading and went and sat in my car by the beach looking at the horizon for about an hour, just in tears, just dealing with, okay, this is now going to happen. I can't ignore this anymore. That was a Friday, went home on the Friday night, and that was the 2 nights that I didn't sleep, didn't that couple of days was really just a void almost. And then the Sunday morning, I thought, I've got to tell him. He hasn't approached me, so I've got to say it. And just went into the lounge where he was sitting on the Sunday morning and just said, I just need to let you know that I'm leaving, basically. I can't remember the exact words, but pretty much that's what I said. But the difficult part was that then I had no idea where I was going to go. Had 2 kids. One of them was in the States. My daughter was in the States at the time. I wasn't sure how that was going to play out when she got back either. I ended up telling her while she was still in the States, which she wasn't happy about at the time, but in hindsight now says she's glad I had told her, so she was a little bit prepared when she got back. I then found a girlfriend who was actually girlfriend/client of my bookkeeping business, had a rental property that was about to come up for become vacant. So she offered me first option on that, which I took, but I had to wait 6 weeks to get it. So,
whoa, that would have been hard.
It certainly was. That was 6 weeks in the family home that was no longer feeling like the family home. It felt a little bit more like a jail. Not that there was no aggression. My ex and I very rarely fought. When I think for my kids' sake, thank goodness for that. It was more something that I would just take myself away from situations and not allow things to blow up, which rightly or wrongly, that's just how I dealt with things. So that 6 weeks was extremely difficult. But then got the house. That same person also had some furniture in storage, which she very kindly loaned me. All I took out of the family home was the bedroom suite, so the dressing table and bedside tables, which is something I'd bought myself with my own money. So I was very intent on
symbolic.
And the washing machine. So everything else stayed. I had no interest in fighting over material items. So I wasn't going to go there. And also the house was going to have to go up for sale. So I knew it had to stay furnished, and my ex and my son stayed in the house. And my daughter came and lived with me in the rental that we got. And yeah, it just sort of went from there. That was very difficult initially because I think my daughter resented me quite a bit, even though she was the one that probably understood what was going on more than anybody. But it disrupted her more than it did my son, and I think that was very hard for her to deal with. But because we ended up still living together, we were able to work through that. So we're very close, great. And we've got a fabulous relationship. But it just had those few little bumps there, but we were able to work through them.
It would have been incredibly surprising if there wasn't some bumpy roads between such a massive change. Yes. But so you're moving through this adjustment period, and then at the beginning when I was reading the different things that you do, you're this beautiful amalgamation of all these different aspects. On one side we've got the bookkeeping side, which is very very systematic, linear thinking, and then on the other side we've got this commitment to spirituality and to emotional expression and that physical somatic practice with yoga. There's so many different parts to you. So do you feel that you had the opportunity to actually sort of, I guess, expand out into the whole of you now, that there wasn't these parameters that were around you any longer?
Absolutely. I think that was a big part of it, because the bookkeeping business is what I've done for 22 years now. That's what's brought money into the family home. That's what's paid the bills. That's what also supported my ex's business while his business was struggling and ended up closing. So there was never in my mind, never the ability to explore anything else other than just keep that business running. So yes, definitely once I was out of the marriage, that clarity did come a little bit, took a while. And also I was actually at that time working for an accounting firm. I'd worked for myself for quite some time, and I went back and worked for an accounting firm for a couple of years. And it was during that time, which is when I left the marriage. And then 6 months after I left the marriage, the 3 partners of the accounting firm decided to split their business. And the one partner who I did not get on with and didn't trust and didn't particularly like said he wanted to retain the bookkeeping aspect of the business. And through their negotiations and so forth, that's what happened. And that was almost a breaking point, because I just could not visualise myself working directly for this guy. And the clients that we had were clients that I took to the business that were my original business's clients. Very confusing, another story. um, but so I ended up going back out on my own and virtually took my clients with me because there was no legal restriction for me to do that because of various reasons. And so then I was back on totally reliant on myself. I didn't have a salary anymore. I was totally independent, running a business again, and not really knowing whether all the clients were going to stay with me, whether that change was going to cause disruption there. So I can remember how that felt and how much fear came back into my world at that point, because that one security I did have was the fact that I was employed by a firm that was paying me a regular salary. So that was a little bit scary.
That would have been. I can feel it in your voice.
Yes.
Also, as you're remembering it. Yeah, but a question that comes to me as I'm hearing that is, and I know with my own experience, how do I describe this? If there is a reliance on yourself, but also this concept of being looked after, I think that's what I really want to delve into a little bit here, because this is something that you would be pretty familiar with, being in the yogi world, and in that world where emotions and possibilities are very much embedded. For me, when I went through major change, if I go back to one of the first instances when I moved out of addiction, there was a real encouragement to connect with the concept of a higher power, whether that be universe, God, trees, whatever it is, but something outside of yourself that gave evidence that there was a bigger picture going on. And that was one of the things that really helped me anchor into this feeling of being taken care of. It's going to be okay. I can get through this. What did you have in that area? Was your yogic practice helping to balance and settle that fear?
Yes, and yes. That was probably, and probably right at the point of leaving the marriage. That was what was really calling me, is that I knew that I would get through, that I'd be okay.
Yeah.
For that exact reason, because I knew there was a greater force that was going to, and I was listening to my inner voice, which in my world is my spiritual guide. So I knew that that was a big part of the courage. That's where I got the courage from through that period. I also had some healing called Hahnemann healing, which I also got myself accredited in and have delivered it myself to other people and seen some pretty significant benefits from, which is an energy healing, a little bit like Reiki. And it's a very specific healing on particular emotions. And I can remember when I was doing the training, it was part of my initial yoga teacher training. We did the Hahnemann healing training as part of the same course. And there was 4 of us, I think, from memory. And during the training, we'd do healing points on each other. And this was probably, I think, 5 months in after I left the marriage. And one of the points we were working on this particular day was separation. And I just went, whoa, this is going to be all about my ex-husband, surely. But you do try and sort of, and when you're working on a client, you don't necessarily discuss the particular point until after you've done the healing, because you don't want the logical mind to interfere. But because we were training, of course, I knew what the point was, and I laid down and I was having the healing, having the point worked on, and the thought of my ex didn't come up at all. It was actually my son.
Well, that was unexpected.
It was very unexpected. But then when I thought about it and sort of debriefed with the practitioner afterwards, I'd separated myself from my son at the same time as I separated from my ex-husband.
Yeah, because he was living back with him.
He stayed with his dad. And in that 5 months, I had not had any one-on-one time with him. Every time I saw him, my daughter was there as well. So that night, I rang my son. I said, I'm taking you out for dinner and we're going to sit and chat, sort of thing. It was fabulous. We sat and talked about, I can't remember exactly what, but he came up with things that he hadn't talked to me about before, and it was just such that was the first real one-on-one connection I'd had with him since I left. And without that healing, I may not have made that realisation, and, that could have caused issues with my relationship with my son if I hadn't dealt with it. So that was amazing. And that was one of the points that I realised that, wow, this healing is pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And that was another thing that certainly helped me work through the emotions of what was going on, as well as that trust in the universe that I was going to get through things.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing that I'm hearing here is because there's a difference between hearing something, understanding something, and taking action on something. I think that balance that I'm always encouraging my clients and myself to do is find that balance between action and allowing. So, we can't just sit here and manifest, just like think good thoughts and the world lands in your lap. I mean, I don't believe that. I think you can be aligned energetically, but you have to take action. You have to partner with the universe or with whatever, force that you want to believe in to make things happen. And there's that beautiful example of you recognizing something and taking action straight away to bring that back into balance. And that seems like that's been a huge lesson all along, to really tune into that inner voice. I think I like to call that the inner sage. When we've all got an inner critic that's having a bit of a go at us, as I call mine Helga. So I apologize to any people listening who know a Helga. But Helga comes storming into the room when you're on a growth edge, when you're trying something new, when you are pushing out of your comfort zone, and she starts throwing the emotional hand grenades at you, and a fear comes up. But underneath all of that fluster and bluster, which is designed to keep you safe, there's that other voice. And it sounds like you've got a really strong connection that you've worked on, but a strong connection to that inner sage that helps you see and know what's right for you. Is it a feeling? Like, how do you connect with that inner voice yourself, or that inner knowing?
Definitely through meditation and my yoga. And I think just sitting with questions, I guess. There's one thing that I like to do when there's a choice put in front of me and that I'm really not sure of, and maybe there's a little bit of fear or doubt around, is that actually sit with the question and within yourself answer the question no, and then answer the question yes. And in each of those moments, see how that feels in your body. Because as soon as you say yes to something, if you start to feel tightness through your body, especially through your heart space or anywhere in your body really, that's a sign that maybe the yes isn't quite the right answer right here, right now. I'm a big believer that our body feels much more of our emotions than we like to admit, I think, sometimes. And it takes a while. It takes a bit of work, as you said, doing the work. It takes a bit of work to get a real connection with that understanding in your own body, as well as, and not letting the logical mind always dominate.
I think that's such an important point. There was a lovely guest I had actually a couple of years ago now who talked about this being the body barometer. I just thought that was a beautiful way of explaining it. And I know in my own experience, one of my challenges has been I've been very heady in the past. Like, I think a lot. I'm a strategist by trade, so I was always valued for how I could think and the intelligence and the ideas and that. But someone described it. My body was just a means of transportation for my head, and I couldn't continue in life like that. That was not going to work long term. So a huge growth edge for me over the last probably 5-10 years has been committing to this unification between head, heart, and body. And I know I've only done a little bit of yoga and a little bit of meditation myself, but that's a part of it. I think, what's the expression? Somatic practice.
Yeah.
So can you just, for the people like me who are still on a growth journey here, what does somatic practices mean overall, and why is it so important?
Well, I think for me, it's really just that those energetic levels in the body. We know our physical body. We can feel, we can touch, we can see our physical body. To some level, we know our minds, although I think we can sometimes think we know our minds more than we actually do. And to me, the somatic side of it really is just those energy levels of the body that are intangible, but are so powerful. And using, I suppose, yoga just seems to, I actually believe all exercise brings some level of it. Yeah. I think as soon as we're moving our bodies, we're connecting with it. And especially if we're doing it mindfully, there's, processes that you can go through that really, I guess, just give you that connection. I mean, I've seen experiences with people that I've worked with myself, that I've had one lady who was a mouth breather all her life and had no idea that she breathed through her mouth. And as much as that's not necessarily a really detrimental thing to be happening, it's not ideal, because our nose is our filter, and we're designed to breathe through our nose. And through the yoga practices I did with her, she then became a nose breather and was able to breathe really well using her nose and breathing out through her mouth when she chose to. And she was astounded of what difference that made to many aspects of her body. And I think that just connecting and understanding what's going on in your body, when we just seem to just go around mindlessly, going through the motions of our day-to-day without even realising, even just standing in a queue, how are we standing in that queue? It's just so many different, and I think doing it through yoga practice and things, even if you only get one little moment that you think of it during the day when you're not on your yoga mat, that moment is a win. And reminding people that those sorts of things are so important, and not berating yourself for the moments that you didn't think of it. So
if you could see me here having closed my mouth and breathing steadily through my nose whilst you were talking. So I know the word mindfulness gets bandied about a lot, but if you really bring it back to its simplest form, it's just being aware of what's happening and what you're feeling right now.
Exactly.
And then again now. And I know I've started doing more regular just walking in the mornings and just really appreciating what I'm seeing and hearing and feeling. And so that's sort of, I guess, my mindfulness practice. It doesn't have to come in a certain form or shape. There's no like you should do it this way or should do it that way. It's what feels connected and anchored for you, isn't it?
Yes, and I think I remember a little cartoon I saw not long ago that was a cartoon of someone walking a dog, and the little thought bubble above the dog and above the person, there's all these ridiculous thoughts and things going on in their heads as they're walking through this beautiful space with their dog, and all the dog's thinking about is the trees around him. So
I remember seeing that one. Yeah, and it was that difference.
Just displays it beautifully, because we just, instead of putting that aside and just enjoying the walk with the dog, noticing where we're walking, noticing what we're walking past, instead of thinking about what we've got to do when we get back from the walk.
Yep, I think, we've got a puppy here, which he's not a puppy, but I call them all puppies. He's coming up 2 years now. But we were reflecting the other day how much time we spend now out walking because we have a reason. And it's like, well, why didn't we do that before for ourselves? Mm-hmm. Why did we have to come up with, again, someone outside of ourselves that we're doing this good thing for? And it was just, just made me have a little bit of a think there, that as you mentioned, just the recognition of putting yourself first and choosing yourself and deciding to support yourself. It's what we all need to do. Now, it might not be as, inverted commas, dramatic as needing, for lots of different reasons, to end a relationship and to move out into a new phase of life. But it is that opportunity in every moment to make a choice that supports you.
Yes.
That's what it sounds and feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And every day there's choices.
There are. Well, my darling, when you're looking back now with the benefit of what I call hindsight, which is, compassionate reflection, I mean, I dare say you can see in the, 8-9 years.
Yeah, it's been a while now. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to meet you down when you came on one of my retreats for your business and next chapters in general, and get to know you a little more there. But there's so many things that are going on with you now. But what's next for you? What is coming? What do you feel is asking to be seen now? I'm still fairly deeply involved in the bookkeeping business, but that's something that I'm working on to, one, get more of the tasks day to day delegated to staff, which is working well and it's going along nicely. The yoga and health coaching is still a work in progress, and it's certainly something I'd like to be doing more of in my future. But yeah, there's plans and tasks and things in place now that I can see a little more clearly that where that's going as far as developing. I mean, the yoga I'm teaching weekly, so that's lovely. We had a big break in that last year, of course, because of all the Victorian lockdowns, but that also highlighted to me how important that is, both for my own emotional, mental and physical wellness, but also just that connection of the people I missed so much were these people that were coming to my yoga classes, and I hadn't seen them for 12 months. And some of them, that was the only time that I would see them. So it's really nice to be back doing that too, and understanding and appreciating how important that connection is. I think when another piece of what has happened in the last 8 years is I've met a new partner. I'm in a lovely relationship now. I'm also in a different region. So I moved to be with my new partner into a new region where I knew no one else, and was moving an hour away from my son. My daughter was already in Sydney. So, no, she wasn't already in Sydney. She was living in Mentone, another part of Melbourne. But so I moved up here on my own. So that was a big step as well, taking myself into a whole new region where I knew nobody. And that also opened up an opportunity for me, because no one up here knew me as Deb the bookkeeper. And I've been Deb the bookkeeper down in my other area on the Mornington Peninsula for, back then, probably 18 years. So that was another little block for me, that how am I going to become Deb the yoga teacher if everyone knows me as Deb the bookkeeper?
It was like shedding a skin to move into the next chapter.
It was. So I didn't tell anyone up here that I was a bookkeeper. The business was just ticking away, and I was, I had clients, and unfortunately able to do a lot of my work remotely. So that wasn't an issue. And I used that opportunity to establish myself as a yoga teacher in this area. And I was successful in doing that. It's had a few different little direction changes because of, a studio closed, or I was teaching in the gym, and now that's not happening since COVID finished and the lockdowns finished and so forth. But I'm regularly teaching and known as a yoga teacher here, but I've now also got clients in the bookkeeping business up here.
I love how the two of them are blending together so beautifully.
Yeah, and they've actually come hand in hand in some ways, because the recommendations I got on a couple of the clients here came from yoga students.
Oh, perfect. Well, this is, I think, one of the things that COVID, as well as changes in relationship and everything else, show us is our incredible power for adaptability. If we make the choice for self-support to take care of our desires, because I know when we are in a space of where we're feeling, as though we can freely express ourselves, then that's when we do our best work. I mean, to me, the whole next chapter model when it comes to a business is that there needs to be this blend of a sense of contribution, a feeling of fulfillment, and the reward and a financial reward. The three of them need to come together. And so I know when I had my marketing agency, which I grew over time, but I'd never actually paused to check in that I was getting the sense of fulfillment. I was contributing, I was getting financially rewarded, but it didn't feel so great. So that coming back into that body barometer, I was really disconnected from it. But now I'm far more connected than I was. But that's been a process and a commitment, as we've talked about. And it sounds as though, you've made so many inroads there. I guess you would be more in touch with what feels right and wrong when you ask yourself those questions, as you said. What does the yes feel like? What does the no feel like? It's a work in progress. None of us are perfect, but it sounds as though there's been a heck of a lot of growth.
Definitely, and I think I'm a very different bookkeeper and BAS agent now than I was 10, 15 years ago.
Without a doubt. Like, we'll be looking at, I guess, like a full-figured looking at someone from their business from all angles now, not just from one direction. Yeah, it makes sense. Well, Deb, this whole, the generosity of you sharing what it was like and what you were experiencing and, what has become possible for you. Think about the woman who's listening right now who may be in a similar scenario where it's like, look, there's nothing really wrong, but it doesn't feel like I want to feel. What would you say to her to help her find her truth?
I think you do need to do the bit of exploring. And if we're talking within relationships, especially within a marriage, if you feel like you've tried everything, you've made the efforts, and you're not getting any sort of any progress in getting any sort of fulfillment out of the relationship yourself, I think it's finding something, reaching out for, whether it be not external, but I think you need the support. I think that my yoga community was my support. So it's having, whether it be a hobby, whether it be a friend, whether it be another family member, whatever that looks like for an individual, it's just knowing that you've got that little bit of support or a shoulder to cry on, or an ear to listen is vital, because I think without that in some shape or form, you're going to always feel like it's too scary to take the step. Trusting your inner voice, as we've talked about, I think really understanding that there is a higher power than all of us, and with the right intentions, you will always be okay. So it's so different for everybody, I think. But I think just trusting your inner voice and having faith that if it's got to be right both ways. A relationship is meant to be a two-way street. And if there's not that two-way street, if you're feeling like it's all one way, which is certainly where I ended up, that there is options. You have choices, and those choices are yours to make. And no one can make them for you, but you can have support around you that can help you work through how to make those choices and how to come out of them the other side a bigger and better, happier, healthier, more rounded person to then explore what else the world's got out there for you.
That sounds like a beautiful promise that is definitely available for us. Deb, that was fabulous. And one of the things I love to end up with on these conversations is we have a next chapter inspiration playlist where we're popping songs which people have found, something that uplifts you, inspires you, just as a real favorite, something that energizes you. Do you have one that you'd like to add to the list?
I tossed around with a couple, actually. There's quite a few out of my yoga music now that I refer to, but they're a little less common, a little less easy to access. But the couple that sort of, when I think back about these journeys that I've been through, one of them would have to be Immersion. Because
classic.
Yeah, because that to me just imagine imagine the possibilities. And I think the other one that I always probably go back to when I need a little bit of a lift is I've been a long-term Rolling Stones fan, and it'd have to be Start Me Up.
Oh, that was on the tip of my tongue. I was thinking she's going to say Start Me Up.
But yeah, having been growing up as a teenager and early 20s in the 80s, I was a big fan of live music, and any of the Aussie bands of that era certainly bring a smile to my face, but always a Rolling Stones fan, and the Start Me Up is one that I always go to.
Oh, now you've imprinted it in my head. It's in my head now, like it's just repeating. And I have an absolute love for books. Anyone who's in my world knows how many books are in my world. So it's always lovely to hear a suggestion of something that might be missing from someone's bookshelf. So do you have a recommendation or a book that you've really enjoyed?
I'm not as avid a reader as you are, Angela, I know that, but there is one that we probably both would totally agree on, which would be Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. For me to actually read a book from cover to cover is a huge achievement anyway, and this one I couldn't get to the end of quick enough, and
captivated you
now that I feel like I want to read it again. But that, and especially at the time that I read it, which was right in the midst of the change of leaving the marriage, but also not just the change of leaving the marriage, the change of really opening myself up to the possibility of becoming a yoga teacher as well.
Yeah.
Was life-changing. It really was.
You were in the arena, as she would say. You were in the arena daring greatly.
Yep, show up wholeheartedly and step into the arena, some of those terms that she uses, those phrases, I remind myself of constantly. Mm-hmm. And it's, all her work is amazing, but that one in particular really, really helped me get through and open myself up to the universe.
Well, that one's it's actually very close to me. I can almost reach it from where I'm sitting. Yeah. I'm with you on that one. It's a fabulous, fabulous book. Well, Deb, thank you so much again for spending your time here with me. And as we talked about before I hit record, our goal with any of these conversations on the Your Next Chapter podcast is just to share a story which may act as a catalyst for somebody else who's, standing on that edge of their next chapter. So I really appreciate all the different aspects of you and your journey that you shared here with us today.
Thanks, Angela. It's been a pleasure.
I'm so pleased. And for you, my lovely reader, what am I saying? Not books, we're talking about podcasts, my lovely listener. You know, one of the things that came to me, I was thinking as I was listening to Deb, is quite often when we're thinking about change, be it a significant leap into a whole new next chapter, you know, leaving a relationship, closing a business, leaving corporate, all the different things we've been talking about on this series, quite often we ask ourselves, but what if this goes wrong? But how about we flip that dialogue and we ask ourselves, what if this goes right? Imagine the possibilities if I trust my heart, if I trust this feeling, especially if this feeling has been hanging around for a while. True desires, the ones that are meant for you, I believe that they're not fleeting visitors. They don't just pop in and drop a bit of an idea and then disappear forever. They keep coming back. So if there is something that is tapping you on the shoulder and then waiting for you to turn around and look at it fully and make a change, perhaps this is the conversation that you've listened to today that may be that catalyst to help you pause and think and then decide and act. You don't have to have all the pieces of the puzzle. You just need the first few steps. If you step out in faith and have that trust of that inner sage, then who knows what might unfold for you in your next chapter. So thank you for spending your time here with us today. And until the next episode, take very good care.